We're back for your ears only. I'm David Alpern with AP's Warren Levinson and more 9/11 coverage from our September 16th, 2001 Newsweek On Air broadcast.
It is my hope there would not be long-term impacts. Certainly, this is a setback for the financial markets, the financial district, specific industries, but I point to the resiliency of the U.S. economy to recover from setbacks like this. We've survived a lot of things in our history, and we're going to survive this and carry on.
Allan, chief strategist for the Edward Jones brokerage in St. Louis. Last week's sneak attack clearly bypassed the most traditional American icon, the Statue of Liberty, to take out a much larger, newer, nearby icon of the nation's economy and the world's. The destruction of the World Trade Center also paralyzed nearby Wall Street, raising serious questions about its ability to ever fully be what it was.
Experts disagree on which way the mind-boggling devastation and the plans to rebuild will tip an economy already teetering on the brink of recession. Midway Airlines quickly went out of business during the airport lockdown. The whole industry is warning of bankruptcy because of new security requirements and fear of flying. To talk more about it, we have Newsweek Wall Street editor Allan Sloan and Jim Simmons, president of SunGard Recovery Systems, which helps get businesses in crisis back up and online.
But first, more of your views from that new Newsweek poll. 63% are worried that financial and psychological fallout from the attacks will seriously hurt the U.S. economy, including 24% very worried. Somewhat fewer, about 1 in 5, are also very worried that the world economy and individual portfolios will be seriously hurt.
And now, Allan Sloan. Allan, you say that morality triumphed mammon on Wall Street last week. How so?
Because firms that normally are at each other's throats and stock exchanges who are bitter rivals all agreed to set everything aside, cooperate, and let the money go. The NASDAQ market could have been back much earlier than the New York Stock Exchange, but chose not to do it. Various firms that could have traded and left other firms at a disadvantage because, to be blunt, the people in them are largely dead. They all agreed to not trade. It was amazing. You don't see stuff like that often. In fact, I think probably never.
You say the New York Stock Exchange itself was not really harmed. What are the big problems for what we generally think of as Wall Street?
The problems are, first of all, a lot of people are dead, and their firms are not functional yet. Second, there were huge problems. A lot of communication stuff was wiped out. Electricity was wiped out. Buildings are unsafe. A lot of people who survived and businesses that survived have nowhere to go, and they've got to scramble and set up. So even though the stock exchange building itself was fine, they can't operate without phones. They can't operate without mass transit to get the workers there. They can't operate without power. They can't operate without a lot of things, none of which they had.
What about the idea of Wall Street, or at least that segment of Lower Manhattan that we come to think of as Wall Street, as a physical place? I mean, basically the financial industry has grown beyond there, especially given the prevalence of computers a lot in recent years. Does this accelerate that?
Yeah, I think what's going to happen here is two things. First, you have all these firms who have office, who no longer have office space, and they've got to go somewhere, and there's not enough space certainly in Wall Street and probably not in New York City to accommodate them, so they're going to go other places, and even after the rebuilding is done, many of them will never come back. And also, I'm not sure how the New York Stock Exchange, which is a physical place, can dare risk being subjected to going out of business again. So I don't know what's going to happen there.
At this obviously premature point, also, how do you see the national economy being moved by the destruction? By $40 billion planned for rebuilding, recovery, reorienting security and defense capabilities? What other key factors, like Mideast oil?
Yeah, you see, I don't know what's going to happen. The question is, will investor confidence collapse and people stop spending? Will the Federal Reserve cut rate cuts more and rates more than it otherwise would have, and what effect will that have? If something happens and the oil exporting countries decide to play games and oil goes to $50 a barrel, God only knows what will happen. On the other hand, you can make the case that all of this extra spending, that the $100 billion or $150 billion that the world's central banks have put into the system will help start a boom. There's absolutely no way to tell.
Wall Street editor Allan Sloan. Next up, Jim Simmons of SunGard Recovery Systems, which has 5,000 client firms and experience in 600 previous disasters. Obviously, you've never seen anything like this. What are these companies going to need?
We have handled dozens of disasters at one time before from hurricanes, but I think the human tragedy and the fears made this one different. Because of that area of Manhattan that was affected, what we found is that the majority of firms are relocating office space, 25 to 50 people, moving them up to SunGard centers up and down the eastern seaboard, Jersey City, Boston, Philadelphia, etc., and managing their business out of there. It's not an area of Manhattan where you find huge, large data centers, but it was quite occupied with office space that people need to replicate.
You have both backup locations throughout North America and a fleet of mobile recovery facilities. What do these facilities offer?
Basically, everything a business needs to keep in business. They've got computer systems, power generation, redundant networks, access to the internet, as well as desks, chairs, phones, fax machines, 26 of those facilities around North America, and actually we're fortunate now with 27 disasters, we're running at less than half capacity. And
in some of these cases, or in a lot of these cases, these clients have already given you backup information, data files that they can now draw back on?
Absolutely. We had a bond trading company that traded $5 billion in bonds on Thursday from our Jersey City center.
What is your experience with companies that have, for one reason or another, had to move out of their location? Do they generally come back?
I believe certainly Lower Manhattan will get rebuilt and it will still remain the financial center. It's just going to take a lot more time than the normal run-of-the-mill disaster.
Jim Simmons is president of SunGard Recovery Systems in Philadelphia. We also spoke with Newsweek Wall Street editor Allan Sloan.
And more from the news. She never sat back. That was U.S. Solicitor General Theodore B. Olson about his wife Barbara, the lawyer and TV commentator who called him from a hijacked American Airlines jet before it crashed into the Pentagon. She asked me, what should I tell the pilot, Olson said. She was trying to do something.
He didn't appear to be a religious fanatic at all. That was Dr. Frank Ritchie, an aeronautics professor, about former student Walid al-Shehri, one of the suspected suicide terrorists.
Now a quote from last week's news. Reckless, conscious disregard of known risks. That was a federal judge in New Orleans holding energy giant BP primarily responsible for the 2010 Gulf oil spill, meaning up to $18 billion in new civil penalties beyond the $28 billion BP has already spent on damage claims and cleanup costs. Another federal judge last week blocked Ohio's cutback on early voting as unfairly disadvantaging minorities and the poor. And a federal appeals court in Chicago declared bans on same-sex marriage in Indiana and Wisconsin, quote, totally implausible and unconstitutional, echoing similar decisions in Oklahoma, Utah, and Virginia. Next from our September 16, 2001 broadcast, a new view of America and the world for your ears only.